Okay, so this is going to be your initial foundation for going through our 12-week transformation program. Um, so this will be the first of your nutritional coaching. And we're going to lay out not only kind of the rules or what we're trying to accomplish throughout this 12 weeks, but kind of get you thinking about some of the reasons of why we eat the foods that we eat. And ultimately realize that the biggest problem that we have is a huge disconnect between food and physiology. So we have to ask ourselves why we eat food in the first place. And so the natural answer in South Louisiana is because food tastes good. But in reality, we all know that we eat food because it has nutrition in it. It has vitamins and minerals and proteins and fats and carbohydrates and all of these secondary compounds and phytonutrients, which there are thousands of. We don't even know what they all do. But we know that there's more in a carrot than just vitamin K, right? So when we ask ourselves, well, why do we eat this food? And we realize, well, okay, it has nutrition in it. And you really stop and think about that for a minute and realize, well, what happens once that nutrition gets in our body? Or, what does the body do with that nutrition? Well, when you take a step further, we know that it goes through the digestive process, and then, okay, so then it goes into the stomach, and it breaks it down, and then into the small intestines. What then? Well, that's where, in a nutshell, the food is broken down and absorbed. The nutrients of that food are absorbed through the intestinal walls and into the bloodstream, and then the body distributes it out throughout the body. And so, okay, well, what then? What happens from there? Well, eventually that nutrition makes it to cells, and then these enzymes and these nutrients that go into the cell are what the cell or the vital resources that the cell needs to do its job. So what is the job of the cells? Well, the job of the cells are to repair skin tissue, right? So when we cut ourselves, the body, as you well know, lays down a scab and eventually scar tissue. Well, what does it do that with? And the answer is it does it with the nutrients that was found in your nutrition. So these nutrients at the cellular level do everything from, repair wounds like a cut or grow hair, not mine but yours. New eye tissue. When you exercise and you're breaking down muscle tissue, the cells use this nutrition to rebuild that muscle tissue. It supplies your immune system and detoxification system with the resources they need to fight off bacteria and viruses. So really, we eat food so that our body can do all of these physiological processes that are necessary just to go through life every day. And that's, even beyond, giving us the energy supply that we need to be active or even think, right? So it kind of goes back to the old saying, which is literal, you are what you eat. Because we literally are what we eat. What we eat literally becomes a part of our tissue. Every day, millions and millions of skin cells die and new ones are made. So you have to ask yourself, what are these new skin cells, actual tissue, being made from? Eye cells die every day, new ones are made. So if we have millions and millions of cells being made every day, what are they being made from? And think about that for a minute, and think about what the average American eats. And then realize that is literally, because we've all heard the saying, you are what you eat, but it's literally going to be a part of your body. So is that food that you're eating, is it sustaining, life-giving nutrition? Or is it something that is taken away from your health and vitality? So on that aspect, or that note, we'll talk about quality of food, right? So on one side of the coin, we certainly have, before we even get into how much, am I eating enough, am I eating too little, we got to talk about the quality of the food. So that's when we get into the subject of organic versus conventional foods. So in the organic model, which we'll talk about first, which we'll use this sheet here. Everything starts with the nutrients that are in the soil. So in the circle of life, right? In this model here with this diagram, there are anywhere between 600,000 to 1,000,000 microorganisms living in 1 teaspoon of soil. Okay, so these microorganisms metabolize the nutrients that are in the soil, and they in fact actually feed nutrients to plants, be it a shrub, a tree, or an apple tree, or a carrot. So if you were a moose in the wild and you reached the end of your life cycle and died, your carcass, after the coyotes got to it, would begin to decompose, and that essentially is what becomes nutrition for the microorganisms living in the soil. So any organic matter, be it a moose or the clippings from your lawn, or when the leaves fall on the ground, any organic matter, when it gets to a certain stage of decomposition, it becomes what's called humus. And humus is any organic matter at the optimal stage of decomposition that it becomes nutrition for microorganisms in the soil. So that's how the iron and the copper and the phosphorus and all of these elements and nutrients get in the soil in the first place. And then these microorganisms metabolize this and they feed it to plants, and then trees grow, grass grows, carrots grow, and potatoes grow, and all of the things that animals eat, humans in otherwise. And then of course those die off and becomes organic matter, and the cycle just continues. So that is healthy because that is how plants get their nutrition in the first place. So just like we asked the question, why do we eat food? Well, because it has nutrition in it. This says, okay, well, how does the food get its nutrition in it? And this is how, through the circle of life. So in order for that model to sustain itself, there actually has to be nutrition in the soil. Because if the soil is depleted, well, then the plant it's going to be nutrient depleted, right? And then of course, animals and man eat plants and animals. We'll get to that in a minute. So when we look at that process and how that is worked for literally thousands of years, and then we look at the process that happens now, which is conventional farming practices, which if you really think about it is a very relatively short period of time. I mean, we've only been processing food pre-World War II, which is a very short period of time in the grand scheme of things. So with conventional farming practices, the soil has been found to be 85% deficient in the microorganism population in it. So why is this? Well, because of the use of 21st century agricultural farming chemicals, fertilizers and fungicides and pesticides and things of these nature. So when you have the unpaid labor force, which is the microorganisms in the soil that are reduced by 85%, and you understand basic botany, it's scientifically impossible for the plants that are growing on that type of soil, be it in the wild or in a conventional crop, to get the nutrition that they need or that they're supposed to have. So what ends up happening, which is why conventional farming practices use chemical fertilizers, and the problem with that is they're isolates, right? It's an isolate of iron, potassium, vitamin K, man-made chemical products that aren't the organic matter, the humus that the microorganism population uses for nutrition themselves, which is why the microorganism population is reduced by as much as 85%, is because there's nothing in the soil for the microorganisms to live on. And in turn, these microorganisms, because they feed nutrition to the plant, they don't have the nutrition or the vital resources to feed to the plant, and therefore the plant is going to be nutrient deficient. And many studies have been done on this that show organic crops, when compared to conventional crops, that the conventional crops are significantly depleted in all of the vital nutrients that we eat the food to begin with, right? So there lies the problem with conventional foods is that they're nutrient depleted just to start with, and it was because they were grown on soil that was depleted. And then when we take that a step further and realize that then we spray pesticides on these crops, so we have this nutrient depleted food, in this case a carrot or a strawberry, or name your fruit or vegetable, and then we spray toxins on top of it. And pesticides typically come in one of two classes. One attacks the nervous system of the pest, and the other class of pesticides attack the hormonal system, causing an estrogenic shift, which causes the pest not to be able to reproduce. So lo and behold, those are some of the things that we're seeing in the human population. We have an increase in neurological disorders, as well as a huge infertility problem. And those for a lot of different reasons, but that's actually absolutely one of the variables. So when we talk about the case of, say, animals, organic versus conventional, we have to ask ourselves the same question that we posed earlier, which is why do we eat food? Well, why does the animal eat food? Why does the cow eat food? Well, it's for the same reason, so they can get nutrition and such. So what are cows supposed to eat? The obvious answer is grass, right? But what do conventional cows eat? Well, they're fed all sorts of things. In fact, we've posted an article on the private page that you guys need to go look at. You Are What You Eat Animal Products, and it'll scare the bejesus out of you. So conventional cattle are raised in terrible, inhumane conditions, who literally stand, eat, and sleep in their own feces, and they're eating all sorts of grains and meals that are not grass, right? It's feed, and you'll be appalled to find out what's in this feed. And so what happens is these cows get sick, which is why every conventional cow is on an antibiotic and hormone. And then you got to realize that they've had to change the laws of what the butcher can sell. Like at one time, if a cow was sick and it had a tumor, they wouldn't allow that meat to be sold. Where now the law is, well, you just got to cut the tumor out. And why would they? It got so bad to where they were all having tumors that they had to change the law, because otherwise we wouldn't have anything to eat, right? So let that sink in for a minute, and then realize that we are eating that cow. We are eating an animal that was so sick and diseased that it had to be given antibiotics and steroids to stay alive. And then realize that's the meat that we are eating, right? And the same thing goes with chickens and turkeys and all of the other animal products that we eat. These animals are on hormones and antibiotics and steroids, and they're sick animals. And then realize that that's the circle of death, or the wheel of death that we call this one here, where we start with a soil that is nutrient depleted. We plant fruits and vegetables on that soil that are going to be nutrient depleted, and then we spray that crop with toxic chemicals, and then we get our fat and protein source from sick and diseased animals. And then we, of course, eat the animals and the crops. And then in turn, we have increased visits to the medical doctor. We have increased instances of every chronic degenerative disease on the planet. We're tired. We have infertility problems. And we're on pharmaceutical drugs every day. I mean, I think the last statistic that I read was 85 to 90% of Americans are on some type of pharmaceutical drug, chronically. So when you look at it that way and you understand just the basic human physiology, it makes absolute sense why we were in the position that we were in culturally, why our 21st century culture is very tired, very sick. When you eat the way that we eat, physiologically, the body has absolutely no choice but to have this chronic degeneration and be degraded. I like to teach the rule of 80-20. If 80% of the time we're eating the right types of food and drinking the right amount of water, getting the right amount of exercise and sleep, and our thought process is healthy, then our immune system and our detoxification system can deal with the 20% of garbage that we're exposed to, either by A, things that we can't control, or B, you want to live a little too. The problem is that the average American, and really the average human in any industrialized country, is 28. At best, they're 28. So for the purpose of this program, we want to significantly decrease the amount of processed and non-organic foods as much as humanly possible. Now, I'm a realist, so I never say 100% of the time, because that's unrealistic and you're just setting yourself up for failure. What we want to strive to do is reach that 80-20 rule. And over time, that 80-20 becomes more like 90-10 because you've built good habits. And you've kind of reconnected with your body, which is another huge part of this my nutritional approach, is to really reconnect with nutrition and how it affects your body. We have an absolutely total disconnect with food and physiology now. And what I mean by that is we're so on the go, that we eat food simply because we're hungry, with no really mindfulness of how that food makes us feel, much less the physiological influence. But we just eat because we're in a hurry, which is why there's so many fast food options now. So one of the purposes here is to reconnect with your body and actually listen to it, because your body will tell you everything that you need to know if you just listen to it, right? So your headache is not a sign of an aspirin deficiency. Your headache is an alarm system that's going off, saying, hey, we have some physiological issues here that need attention. And it could be a myriad of things. It could be dehydration, it could be a blood sugar imbalance, it could be lots of things. But the point is, we want to reconnect with our bodies and listen to these alarm signs, and they'll tell you a lot. For example, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients with nutrition, if not thousands. And once we decrease the amount of processed conventional foods that they eat, when they do experience that 10 to 20%, they'll taste things that they did not taste before. They'll taste chemicals that they did not taste before. Now, they were there before, but the problem was they were so deconditioned that was normal, right? So they were completely desensitized to it. So all of a sudden, when you start cleaning things up and the immune system and the detoxification system start working like they're designed to work, well then those alarm signals start going off and you start recognizing exactly what they are. And that, of course, is how it's supposed to work. A couple of statistics for you. we are exposed to over 15,000 chemicals, okay, just by our food supply alone. Let that sink in for a minute. We're exposed to, or the average American's eating 150 pounds of food additives and preservatives per year. And actually, it's probably more than that, because I've been teaching this stuff for, the holistic methodology for over 15 years. And that was a statistic that I've been using for years. So imagine if we had a 150-pound bag of flour, and that would represent dry weight, right? So we've got 150 pounds dry weight of food additives, preservatives, and chemicals, and I asked you to eat this 1 teaspoon at a time over the next 365 days. You would tell me I'm nuts, and I would be nuts. But that's the reality of it. We're exposed to 15,000 chemicals from our food supply alone. We're eating 150 pounds dry weight of food additives, preservatives per year, and the food's nutrient depleted to begin with. So it's absolutely makes 100% why we look and feel the way we look and feel today, and why we're so unhealthy as a culture. So we're going to go over we're going to go over the entire sheet of the 12-week transformation nutrition program, and what that entails. This is not a quick fix. It's a lifestyle change that we want to be implementing these things over the course of really our entire life, not just this 12 weeks. Before we go into that, I want to touch on a couple things and give you a different way of thinking about it. Food and the body have a very symbiotic relationship. It's a give-take, it's an investment. So every time we put something in our mouth, our body has to deal with it. Okay? So if it's a organic carrot, a piece of organic chicken, it's got nutrition in it, right? It's a good investment. And what I mean by that is this. We have vital resources already on board. We have digestive enzymes. We have all sorts of enzymes. We have vitamins and minerals and proteins and fats and carbohydrates and resources that are already on board that the body has to use to digest this food, break it down, absorb it, right? Distribute it throughout the body into the cells, into the organs and muscle tissue, and all of the cells through all of those processes that we talked about earlier. So that doesn't just happen magically. There's a lot of work. There's a labor force inside our body that has to do that. It's got to break that food down and distribute it, right? So what that means is when we eat food, the body's got to use some stuff that it really needs just to do all that work. But if it's an organic chicken and carrot, it's a good investment because the body says, hey, we're gonna use this labor force, we're gonna deplete it, but we're gonna get the nutrition, those enzymes and everything that we use to do all that work to get that food and the nutrition from that food distributed, broken down, absorbed, and distributed throughout the body. We're gonna get that nutrition back and then some, right? So that's a good investment. That's going to the bank, giving the bank $50, coming back tomorrow, and the bank hands you a $100 bill. Okay, so you got your 50 back plus some. Good investment. And then realize when we eat a piece of food that requires the body to utilize more vital resources that it has on board, okay, more digestive enzymes and vitamins and minerals and proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and all of the work, all of the metabolic work that it takes to digest, assimilate, and distribute these nutrients throughout the body. Anytime it requires the body to use more resources than it actually even gets back from the food, you're at a deficit. Does that make sense? So when I eat, say, a Pop-Tart, okay, that I have to look on the ingredients list, and I have to have a tongue that can do gymnastics just to pronounce, which my liver does not like. How much nutrition is in here? Is my body going to utilize more vital resources on board to digest this food, break it down, detoxify it, and eliminate than it actually gets from the Pop-Tart? And the answer is yes, right? So that's a bad investment. That's going to the bank, giving the bank $50, coming back tomorrow and getting $25. You lost $25. Now let's pause for a minute and really think about that. Eating food is one thing that we do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, every single day of our life. How many meals are bad investments? How many meals are we at a deficit? And if you really wrap your head around that, that's scary. Okay. How long could you sustain yourself financially making bad investments? Not very long. And then realize that every time we eat a meal, it is either a positive investment or a negative investment. And I'm not talking about negative just from a thought process. I'm talking about from a physiological process. When we eat food, if it's got to leach more nutrition from the body than it gives back, then what's that doing to these cells? They can't do their job. You have a labor force in there who has got a job to do, and you're not giving them the resources to do that job. And that's why I say most people are 20/80. At best, they're 20/80. Because if you're grocery shopping and your meals consist of Pop-Tarts, Hamburger Helper, and these highly processed foods that require your body to expend more nutrition dealing with the food than it actually gets from it, then you're at a deficit meal in, meal out, day in, day out, week in, week out, all year long. And multiply that times multiple years. And which is why I so firmly say it is absolutely no wonder, and it makes 100% why we are in the shape that we are in culturally as human beings in the 21st century. The body has no choice but to be sick and diseased. We have given it no choice but to be sick and diseased. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? Because the purpose of me taking this educational approach rather than just giving you a list of foods that you can and can't eat is because the more you understand why I'm trying to coach you to do the things that are going to be healthy for you, the more likely you're going to actually adhere to it. Because, as my mentor Paul Chek says, and told me once, with knowledge, okay, becomes responsibility. So I can accept that most people just don't know, because we're just fed, misinformation with TV commercials and mass media, and that processed milk is just fine. In fact, you need it. So I mean, I understand that. We can't all be an expert in everything, but once you have that knowledge, now you have the responsibility to either do something positive with that knowledge or not. And I know I've said it a few times, but it's that serious when it comes to nutrition. You cannot expect to be healthy when you're eating at a deficit every single day. It can't, physiologically, it can't happen. You cannot sustain that lifelong. So, with the 12-week transformation nutrition program, Number one, you'll see on there, eat as much protein as you're hungry for. Let me start with this. Everything that you see on this sheet, realize that this is the gold standard in that take realize that I'm talking about grass-fed, beef, chickens raised open range on organic grass and organic worms and such. So all the foods that we're talking about here, assume I'm talking about the organic version. And then again, realize that, I don't expect you to do this 100% of the time. That would be unrealistic and you'd be setting yourself up for failure. But for the purpose of this, I want to give you the gold standard and realize that, hey, this is what we're trying to do 80+% of the time. So when I say eat as much protein as you're hungry for, I'm not saying eat a high protein diet. What I'm saying is let's slow down and start listening to our body to see how much protein it wants, because everybody's a little different too. We have a thing called biochemical individuality. So some people will do a little bit better on a higher protein, high fat, low carbohydrate diet, while others will flourish more on a higher carbohydrate, lower fat, lower protein. And some people are kind of in the middle, about half and half of carbohydrates and the other half proteins and fat. And one's not good or better than the other. Everybody's a little different. So the purpose of this is I want you to stop, let's chew our food for a minute, and let's really listen to our physiology, and it'll tell us whether we need to increase, the consumption of, one of those or some of those macronutrients, of the 3 macronutrients, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, or if we need to decrease in certain areas. And of course, that's the reason why we have you guys turn in food logs every week, so that we can kind of coach you through that process too, based on the cravings that you're having with your crashing, you having blood sugar crash too early, or if you're craving salty foods, or if you're craving sweet foods, or all those things tell me certain things about your physiology, so that I can then manipulate some of those ratios that you're having with some of those meals to improve that physiological response. So we want to eat as much protein as you're hungry for, at least 9 ounces of red meat a week, which is not much. It's not much at all. And this is, organic grass-fed beef, so we know there's no antibiotics and no hormones in it. The fat in this beef is actually has nutrition in it. So, because you got to remember, fat's job in any animal, be it a human or a cow, is really, it's not the most optimal energy source, as much as we like it to be, because then we could just burn it off, which we all know it isn't that easy, right? And it's used as insulation for sure, but fat's main job is actually to trap toxins and keep it away from vital organs. Okay, so when we're eating, a grass-fed organic beef, it doesn't have antibiotics and hormones, and it's not a highly toxic food. So even the fat that's in it is more of a healthy saturated fat that's not laced with toxins. So number 2, the biggest, this one's going to be one of the most difficult things, and that's eliminating grains, particularly wheat products. We can have rice, which is a grain. It needs to be an organic rice. But the main thing that we're doing here is we're eliminating all of our breads and our pastas and biscuits and things of that nature. And the reason why is because, one, they're high in polyunsaturated fats, which can cause a lot of inflammation, but also because a lot of people in the United States, because of our strong European ancestry, have at least some form of sensitivity to gluten. Of course, the worst is celiac disease, and that's a full-blown gluten allergy. But there's different variants of that, where someone may not have a gluten allergy like celiac disease, but they may have a sensitivity. And even that sensitivity can range. Some people are more sensitive than others. And that sensitivity causes inflammation. And inflammation in the small intestines causes everything from leaky gut syndrome, where we get small undigested food particles of things that you're not allergic to get into the bloodstream, and the body then produces immunoglobulins against that because it's an invader, and the next thing you know, you're allergic to chicken. Whenever genetically you're not allergic to chicken at all, it's just secondary to what caused the inflammation in the gut in the first place, which was the gluten. Alcohol does the same thing. It inflames the gut and opens up those tight gap junctions of the small intestines, and that's what leaky gut syndrome is. Another little tidbit on that is your small intestines is actually on the same nerve loop as the core muscles. So what are the core muscles? The diaphragm, the pelvic floor, the transversus abdominis, the lower abdominals, the multifidus, the paraspinals, basically all the muscles that create segmental spinal stabilization. And these core muscles serve as a foundation and a working platform for the bigger phasic muscles to work off of. So because that's on the same nerve loop as the small intestines, any inflammation in the small intestines will shut down everything on that nerve loop, or the brain will. So you'll get a defacilitation of all those muscles, which is another reason why low back pain is an epidemic, is because everybody's core, the small muscles that are stabilizing the spine and the pelvis, are not able to activate properly and do their job, which is stabilize the spine and the pelvis. And then when you don't have a stable spine and pelvis, you're at risk for any kind of disc derangements and sacroiliac joint dysfunctions, etc. So, and you'll get this abdominal distension because all of these muscles are turned off, so you get the pooch, right? So some people tell me, well, I don't really get inflamed or bloated after I eat pasta or breads, Chris, so I must not be gluten intolerant. I may not have a sensitivity to gluten. And so when I look at their food logs, I see that they eat, some sort of grain product every single day, and probably have for decades. So the reality of it is, you probably are bloated. You've just been bloated your entire life, so you don't know what it feels like to not be bloated. And again, when we go back to those alarm systems I was talking about, like your headache is not a sign of an aspirin deficiency. Same thing here. When you get off of these grains, in as little as 2 weeks, you can tell the difference. You're like, wow, I guess I was bloated. Especially when you reintroduce it back in, you automatically feel the negative effects of it that you didn't feel before because they were constant. They were there all the time. So once we eliminate those things and you reintroduce them back in, you realize really just how much havoc they're wreaking on your body to begin with. So if we eliminate grains and things like bread and pasta products and things of that nature, what does that leave for carbohydrates? Fruits and vegetables. So for the purpose of this program, you can have any fruit or vegetable you want. Literally any fruit or vegetable you want. We need to pay close attention and be mindful and minimize fruits and vegetables that are high on glycemic index. Because another big goal of this program is to control and regulate blood sugar. So we don't want spikes and crashes. So things like potatoes and sweet potatoes, any of your root vegetables, they're fine to eat. They're good to eat. They're going to be a little higher on the glycemic index, and that's okay. We just don't want to overdo it either. So there's nothing wrong with having steak and potatoes. Just put a lot of organic butter on your potato. Okay, so we increase our fat and protein intake when we eat those higher glycemic foods, and what that does is it'll slow the oxidation rate down and help us control that blood sugar a little better. Same thing with sugary fruits. Completely okay to have a pineapple. We just want to always have all three macronutrients with every meal, be it a meal or a snack. You want to have a fat, a protein, and a carbohydrate. We want to eat just a pineapple or just potatoes, because that's what's going to spike our blood sugar up, and it's going to be followed by a crash for sure. We need to eat every 2 to 3 hours. This is flexible. Everybody's a little different. Really, the main objective here is to eat slightly before you get hungry. If you wait till the point that you're just starving and your blood sugar's already crashed, and we've kind of defeated the purpose of what we're trying to do here, which is regulate blood sugar. Because anytime blood sugar's up, cortisol is going to be up. And the body's going to release that stress hormone. And when cortisol's up, your body's in a physiological environment to store. It's going to store fat. And that's one of the biggest reasons that we have such a weight problem. There's a lot of different reasons, but that's one of the biggest variables right there, is culturally we are not controlling blood sugar very well at all. So our body's in a constant stress mode and overload with cortisol, and our body's just storing fat. You need to drink at least half your weight in ounces of water. In fact, I like to have a lot of people drink 2/3 ounces per pound of body weight just to rehydrate themselves. But at an absolute minimum, take your weight divided by 2. That's how many ounces of water you should have a day. If you're outside expending a lot of energy and sweating and playing tennis, or in South Louisiana just standing outside, you need to consume even more. Eliminate dairy products. This doesn't have to be long term. This doesn't have to be throughout the whole 12 weeks, but specifically during the first 2 weeks. And this is because dairy is on the top 5 food allergens. So a lot of times I've found that dairy intolerances are secondary to the damage that the grains have done in the gut. So we give that a little time to heal, and some people can reintroduce dairy just fine. So eliminate it for 2 weeks, and then maybe the first day in that 3rd week, you can reintroduce a little dairy in one meal. Kind of see how your body responds to that. And then we'll be having weekly coaching calls, and so we can go a little bit more in depth and give you some more advice on that based on how your body responds to that. So avoid for 12 weeks grains, any processed foods, artificial sweeteners, wheat products, soda pops. It'd be great to eliminate alcohol altogether for 12 weeks, but I understand, if we have some here and there. You'll also see dry beans and lentils on here. It's not that dry beans and lentils are the devil. It's just that the reality of it is you need to soak them, which breaks down the phytic acid, and the phytic acid is what inhibits mineral absorption. And it's just going to make it a lot more difficult to plan, and if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So I like to keep this real simple. I mean, you're shopping on the outside of the grocery store with this program. You can have any protein product that you want. If it had a pair of eyes or came from something that had a pair of eyes, it's protein. All those proteins have fat in them already. And if we're talking about organic grass-fed, no antibiotics, no hormones, and we've got healthy proteins and healthy fats. Our carbohydrates are coming from fruits and vegetables on the outside of the grocery store, right? So we've got organic fruits and vegetables. What we've done here is we've eliminated those that 150 pounds of dry weight of food additives and preservatives that we're getting per year. So we've eliminated that toxic overload. We've reduced that exposure of 15,000 chemicals from our food supply, and we're getting nutrient-dense nutrition, which is going to allow your physiology to do what it's designed to do. It's going to be able to support your detoxification system and your immune system. You're going to be able to deal with that 20% a whole lot better when you've got the engine that's designed to do it, right? And that way you're getting the most bang from your workouts too. So when we're breaking all this muscle tissue down with good hard workouts that are designed to improve your body composition, your body actually has nutrition to repair that muscle tissue with. And that's super important, because you have to realize what we're doing, what any strength and conditioning program is designed to do, especially in this particular program. The way that we've designed these workouts and these exercises, or you're utilizing the overload principle. You are putting a task, a movement with a load on a muscle or a group of muscles that is more than it's accustomed to doing. So it's actually putting little bitty micro tears in the muscle, and that's a good thing, because then the body has to repair that. So when it goes to repair it, it says, okay, well, I'm going to repair it, but this time I'm going to do it. I'm going to build it a little bit stronger. I'm going to build it a little bit bigger, and that's good, because you got to realize that it takes that process of just repairing muscle tissue takes anywhere between 48 and 72 hours to repair muscle tissue. So that's a very good thing, because you're burning calories, all of that work, and it's a lot of cellular work that the body has to do to repair that muscle tissue. It's working for 48 to 72 hours to do that. So that is a tremendous amount of calories, which is why weight training will always, always, always trump any cardiovascular training that you can do, right? Because if you go run for 3 miles, you're going to burn some calories. You will. But you'll burn some calories during that 3-mile run, or 30-minute run, or an hour run. However amount of time that you spent doing that cardio, you'll burn some calories during that time, and pretty much that time only, if you're doing any kind of steady state cardiovascular training. The other downfall to steady state cardiovascular training is you're actually teaching your body how to become very, very fuel efficient, which is the opposite of what you want. You want to be you want to be very fuel non-efficient. We'll get more into that with HIIT, high intensity interval training. So with weight training, though, not only are you burning the calories during the workout, but really what matters is that the calories that you're burning over the next 48 to 72 hours, and the fact that you're increasing lean muscle mass. And the good thing with that is muscle mass requires a lot of energy to maintain itself. So long term, a stronger, leaner person is just burning more calories to be able to maintain that muscle mass, which is a very good thing. And so if you're thinking, well, I don't want to bulk up, Chris, I'm not trying to get big, don't worry, it's not going to happen. One, hormonally, women don't have the growth hormone or the testosterone to get like super big like a bodybuilder. And remember that you're burning fat. So muscle is more dense than fat tissue. So as you increase lean muscle mass, you're burning all of that fat tissue and you shrink. So, it's like I always say, you can gain 10 pounds of muscle, lose 10 pounds of fat. The scale may stay the same, but you're taking up less space. It'll look like you lost 15, 20 pounds. And I'm not saying you're not going to lose weight, you will. But I like to use that analogy because, the whole point of muscle tissue is more dense and takes up less space. Number 8, chew your food till it's liquefied. So we need to chew our food thoroughly. The average American chews their food 2, 3, maybe 4 bites tops, and then swallows. And again, that's a problem on a couple different levels. One, that's a lot more work that hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes got to do just to break down that food, and it can't fully break down these huge food particles. So then we're not getting all the mineral nutrition that we need from that food because we just haven't broken it down enough. I know, but I get it. The biggest reason that we do that is because we're go, 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 go. We're eating and meeting, So if we just stop for a minute, chew our food till it's liquefied, not only will we benefit from getting the full absorption of all of the vitamins and minerals and the nutrition that's in that food, but another cool thing happens. Our satiety is regulated a lot better. So what does that mean? Well, in your hypothalamus, you have what's called your apostat. Now your apostat is responsible for regulating the 51 nutritional elements that are in every food, every God-made food. So when Mother Nature grows a carrot or a strawberry, okay, it has all of that food, even animal products, have 51 specific nutritional elements in it. And so the apostat, every time you eat something, is reading these nutritional elements. And whenever it's had enough, it gives you the feeling of satiety. You're satisfied. Then you back off and you're like, you know what? I'm full. This is one of the biggest reasons why we overeat. Okay, why industrialized countries like ours, who have tremendous amounts of processed food, in fact, that most people are eating highly processed food, this is why we are nutrient deficient yet overweight. We're overeating yet we're not getting enough nutrients. How's that? How can you overeat and not get enough nutrients? Well, because the food is nutrient depleted. But one of the reasons why we're overeating is because actually food scientists have and this kind of goes into genetically modified foods, food scientists have purposefully decreased the level of some of these nutrients that are found in food and increased in other areas with the sole purpose of fooling the apostat. And so what that does is it makes you eat more of that particular product. So if it's a Lay's potato chip, but you can't just eat one, Well, actually a psychological and a physiological reason of why that is. And what's really sick is it was planned that way. And so we eat these foods, and we don't know why they're just so damn good, but they're good, and we just can't eat one. It's kind of like me with Oreos. I just simply don't buy them because I will eat the whole thing. And our appetite's saying, hey, something's missing. Keep taking another bite. Take another bite. So when we're eating, an organic food, of course, those nutrients haven't been tampered with and they're there. But if we're eating it 3 or 4 times and we're just chewing, we're really not giving our appetite and hypothalamus the amount of time that it needs to regulate that. Yet if we're chewing our food till it's liquefied and we're taking our time, then our appetite does that job, and you'll be surprised of how much easier it is if you're an overeater to not overeat, because all of a sudden you'll get to a certain part of your meal and you'll be like, wow, I'm good. It may be less food than you normally eat, and that's because your appetite was allowed to do its job, and it says, hey, we're good. We have the nutrition on board that is needed to support our physiology. And so I'm not real big on calorie counting and all that garbage, because in some cases you need to, but I have found, and I've been doing this over 20 years, that if I could just teach people to slow down, listen to their body, drink the right amount of water, eat the right type of food, and eat it slowly, and chew their food, the body takes care of the rest. You will have that feeling of, yep, I'm good. And if you don't know what I mean, just do it, come back and talk to me in 2 weeks, and tell me I didn't steer you wrong. Steer you right. Just one more little tidbit on that. You got to realize that what are the 2 most common things that they add to every processed food? Sugar, right? And salt. Yet it's not really sugar, is it? It's a sugary substance that ends in OSE. High fructose, corn syrup, or maltodextrin. All of these different names that are not sugar that's found in nature, like the sugar that's in a pineapple or a strawberry, right? Because sugar in nature, even if it's from an organic sugar cane, actually has nutrition in it. So when the appestat reads sugar, and it tastes sugar, and it's like, oh man, sugar, here comes nutrition. This is good. Yet when we eat the Oreo cookie, there's no nutrition in it. So the appestat says something's missing. Take another bite. Nope, take another bite. Same thing with salt. So, but it's not salt, it's sodium chloride that they add in there. So salt, in its natural state for thousands of years, had all sorts of trace minerals in there, which are like the keys to enzymes that unlock the enzymes to do their job. Every detoxification pathway in your body is enzyme driven. So when the appestat reads salt, it says, hey, here comes my trace minerals. Yet there's no trace minerals in that sodium chloride that's on that Lay's potato chip. So the appestat says, another bite. Something's missing. Take another bite. Just another reason that we want to stay away from processed food and genetically modified foods. By law, certified organic foods cannot be genetically modified, and so they haven't tampered with any of those 51 nutritional elements. We want to cook with stable fats at temperatures, so things like coconut oil and butter. Those are very healthy saturated fats that are stable when heated. You can have olive oil here and there, but if you really don't want to cook with it, olive oil is a polyunsaturated fat. So when you heat that up, it's very unstable. It goes rancid and creates free radicals. So if you want to put a little olive oil, and some vegetables or something like that, that's okay. We just don't really want to heat that up. So stick with coconut oil and butter for cooking the things that you need to cook and heat up. Okay, so I kind of summed all that up, which is normally about a 2.5 hour lecture. But I wanted to at least get that as the intro into our 12-week transformation nutritional program. There's going to be a lot more coaching that comes, week in and week out. Actually, in every one of your training sessions too. Each week we'll talk more on nutrition, but I want this video to serve as the foundation of what we're going to do, of what we're trying to do nutritionally throughout this 12 weeks, and hopefully, throughout your life. If you have any questions, you know where to find me, and I'm accessible to you, every single day, and I'm right with you, and it's going to be awesome reaching your goals.